Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to the bustling, humid heart of Edo period Japan, where your morning begins not with a hot shower or a cup of coffee, but a scalding communal bath at dawn, surrounded by strangers, under strict social rules, and without a single drop of soap. You step into a cramped wooden house stacked along a narrow dirt alley. The air smells like complicated stew, half charcoal smoke, half pickled vegetables, with a strong top note of fish. You're not sure if it's someone's breakfast or yesterday's market haul decomposing in the sun. Welcome to Edo, the world's largest city in the 18th century, where over 1 million people live side by side, and somehow it's both lively and suffocating. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere unique, drop your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake on a straw mat, your thin cotton futon already damp from your own sweat. No insulation, no AC, just wood, paper walls, and the sound of a rooster crowing from 3 courtyards away. You try not to breathe through your nose. It doesn't help. You're sticky, itchy, and your hair feels like it's been lacquered to your scalp. You desperately want to be clean, but in Edo, clean is more of a daily performance than a personal experience. Historians still argue whether Edo was truly a clean city, compared to its European counterparts. Yes, there was less visible sewage in the streets, and yes, public bathhouses were everywhere. But when 1 million people live elbow to elbow in a mostly wooden city with no plumbing, even basic hygiene becomes a full-time job. You stretch, crack your back, and reach for your worn cotton yukata. It's not stylish, but it hides the sweat stains. As you slip into your sandals and step out into the narrow alley, you immediately regret it. The air outside is even thicker than your room. It clings to your skin, full of early morning heat, fish oil and soot. The neighbours are already stirring, women sweeping dust into piles that will immediately reform, men hauling buckets of water from the nearby canal. You pass a tofu vendor shouting prices into the dawn haze, and a trio of dogs sniffing each other like they own the block. A delivery boy splashes past you, sloshing buckets of soy sauce that smell suspiciously like week-old socks. He nods politely. You nod back. Everyone pretends it's normal, because this is Edo. You follow the side path down to the bathhouse. The building leans slightly, its beams dark with age and moisture. Thin wooden slats make up the walls, and the roof leaks from one corner. Though no one bothers fixing it, it'll just break again next season. Inside, the water's already heating. You can hear the fire crackling through the small iron grates beneath the bath chamber, the hiss of rising steam mixing with the low murmur of groggy bathers already arriving. Now, you might be wondering, why so early? Who decided bathing should be the first act of your day? Well, in Edo, daily schedules often aligned with the rising sun. Farmers, fishmongers, merchants, they all needed to be clean and out the door by sunrise. Bathhouses catered to that routine, opening just after 4 a.m. during the hour of the tiger, a time the Edwats associated with purity, beginnings, and the warm breath of the waking world. Also, if you go any later, the water's dirtier. Let's just say you want to beat the wave of tired labourers and muddy apprentices who've been barefoot all week. As you wait your turn, you stand quietly beside a row of men who could be merchants, actors, or firemen. It's hard to tell in the dim light. Everyone's barefooted, yawning, and clutching their own little set of essentials. A wooden bucket, a thin cotton towel, and in rare cases a tiny satchel of medicinal herbs. You brought your dignity, which might be the first thing to go. There's a moment where you almost turn back. Maybe you could just splash some canal water on your face and call it good. But then a sharp gust of wind blows the bathhouse's sliding door open, and a wave of warm, earthy steam curls toward you like an invitation, or a warning. This is your moment. You slip out of your yukata, fold it neatly, and clutch your towel like it offers more privacy than it does. You step into the bathhouse, and the wood creaks beneath your feet. The air is thick with the scent of cedar, smoke, and wet humanity. The floor is wet. Always. It never really dries. And every board is slightly warped from years of steam and footsteps. The walls are bare, except for a small wooden sign reminding you to be quiet, respectful, and quick. And yet, no one's in a hurry. They sit in silence, some with eyes closed, some scrubbing at their arms with practiced mechanical motion. The light is filtered through steam and paper windows, giving the whole place the colour of weak tea. It's not glamorous, and it's definitely not relaxing. But this is where your day begins. Quirky fact time. The smell of Edo bathhouses, often enhanced by citrus peels. That's right. During certain seasons, bathhouse owners would toss in yuzu peels to both scent the air and slightly disinfect the water. So if you catch a whiff of something vaguely lemony, thank someone's grandmother and her leftover fruit basket. Still, don't expect anything luxurious. There's no soap, no shampoo, and certainly no loofah. You're here for one reason: to strip off yesterday's grime and rejoin society smelling slightly less offensive. And honestly, the real danger isn't even the bath itself, it's what happens next. But we'll get to that. First, you have to survive the scalding heat, the silent judgment of strangers, and the fact that the bathwater's been reheated all morning by someone's teenage apprentice with a questionable work ethic. Welcome to Edo. This is only the beginning. The sky is still dim outside, but inside the bathhouse the world is glowing with mist and muffled sounds. You've just stepped in, steam curling around your ankles, and instantly your skin starts to prickle. The air is heavy, not just warm but thick, as if the moisture wants to settle inside your lungs. And remember, it's the hour of the tiger. That's not some exotic phrase I made up for flair. The Japanese day was divided into 12 hours, each lasting about 2 of our modern ones. The tiger hour stretched roughly from 4 to 6 a.m. It's the time associated with movement, ambition, and freshness. Just perfect for boiling yourself alive in a communal cedar tub, apparently. You tread carefully, trying not to slip on the eternally slick floor. There are no tiles here, just aged planks of wood, swollen slightly with moisture, polished smooth by thousands of bare feet over the decades. You hear coughing from the far end, maybe from the old man who always sits too close to the fire vent. He's already there, of course. He always is. Rumour has it he's been bathing here longer than the bathhouse itself has stood. He nods at you. You nod back. Respect is everything here. A young apprentice, still blinking the sleep from his eyes, shuffles past you with a fire poker. His job? Keep the fire underneath the bath burning hot. Ridiculously hot. He stokes the furnace with chunks of charcoal and the temperature spikes. The walls groan as they expand slightly from the heat. You're pretty sure your eyebrows are singed just from standing too close. And here's where things get interesting. You might think bathing involves getting into the water, soaking and relaxing. Not in Edo. First, you must clean before you bathe. Sounds backwards, right? But that's how it works. You grab your bucket, crouch at the rinsing area, and splash cold water over yourself in quick, shuddering bursts. There's no heater in the washing zone, just a few taps trickling fresh water from a nearby well. You scrub with your tiny towel, rubbing hard enough to remove not just grime, but also your will to live. No soap. Let me repeat, no soap. It's banned. Why? Because it clogs the bath's drainage system and fouls the shared water. Instead, you rely on friction, prayers, and possibly the citrus peel from a bathhouse worker's leftover lunch. Cleanliness is enforced, but efficiency comes first. Historians still debate how much actual hygiene this method provided. Some argue Edo's high humidity and frequent bathing helped reduce disease. Others say that without soap or real scrubbing tools, much of this ritual was more about social compliance than sanitation. Either way, you're expected to do it daily. Skip a few days and your neighbours will start whispering. Skip a week and you may get fined. Or worse, a visit from the local constable with a bamboo cane and strong opinions about decency. Finally, you step toward the bath itself. And that's when the real trial begins. The bath isn't large, maybe 5 feet across, sunken into the floor like a wooden cauldron. Steam rises in thick columns. You can't see the bottom. You can barely see the person across from you. But you can see the edge, and how everyone's perched there, hovering on tiptoe trying to adjust to the temperature. You follow suit, dipping a foot in, and immediately regret it. It's not just hot, it's molten, somewhere between accidental chili oil spill and lava for breakfast. You make a noise that's not quite a yelp and not quite a dignified gasp. Everyone pretends not to hear you, but let's be honest, they're judging you. Welcome to communal shame. You try again. This time you last 3 seconds before pulling back out. Your skin is flushed, turning red already. It's not just painful, it's a little dangerous. The water temperature in these bathhouses regularly hit 48 degrees Celsius, which is around 118 Fahrenheit. That's not hot. That's your cells might file a complaint hot. You sit on the edge, balancing like a flamingo on one leg then the other. Slowly you sink into the water, breath caught in your throat. The initial pain is like needles pricking every pore, but then it shifts. Your limbs go numb in the best way. Your brain stops protesting. The world, fuzzy with steam and wood and quiet grunts, narrows into a strangely serene bubble. Quirky fact for you. Edo bathhouses weren't just hot, they were piping on purpose. Some people believed that the hotter the bath, the more virtuous the bather. Others just liked the bragging rights. If you could stay submerged for more than 5 minutes without fainting, that was worth respect, or at least a decent nickname. You glance across the bath. Someone's brought in a pouch of dried herbs, camphor or mugwort probably. They swirl in the water like tired tea leaves. Supposedly it helps circulation, or maybe it's just another status symbol, like owning a toothpick carved from bamboo instead of wood. Either way, it smells surprisingly good. But make no mistake, this is not your private spa moment. Every movement is watched. You can't stretch out too far, can't splash, definitely can't talk above a whisper. This is a shared ritual, and decorum is enforced by everyone. The old man at the far end gives you a look when your towel dips into the water. You discreetly correct it. Towels should never, ever touch the communal bath. That's bathhouse blasphemy. You try to breathe slowly, match the rhythm of the other bathers. The steam is hypnotic, wrapping around you like cotton. Time slows. Your heart rate slows. And just when you think you might actually enjoy this, someone sneezes, and a fine mist of their respiratory joy settles in the air between you. Lovely. Still, you can't leave yet. Not until your body feels like a wrung-out sponge and your mind is too tired to panic. This is your morning meditation, whether you like it or not. Just be glad you came early. By mid-morning, the water will look like miso soup and smell worse. You rise slowly, head spinning. You climb out on aching legs, trailing hot droplets. You don't dry off. There are no fluffy towels waiting. Just a brisk breeze and your thin cotton yukata, which absorbs maybe 30% of the moisture before giving up entirely. Congratulations, you survived the start of your bath in Edo. Only 18 more sections to go. You've survived the scorching water. Congratulations, but don't relax yet. You're not done. You've only just entered the lion's den. Because now comes the most delicate and socially treacherous part of your morning, enduring the communal bath without violating any of Edo's unspoken rules. You shuffle carefully to a corner, your wet feet slapping against the slippery wood. There's a sort of unspoken choreography here. You sit, but not too close to the bath's edge. You don't face anyone directly. Always angle your body slightly as if you're perpetually mid-turn, and under no circumstance do you speak unless spoken to, especially if you're younger or a stranger. It's easy to forget, but you're not just bathing, you're navigating a mini-society. Edo bathhouses were more than hygiene stops. They were stages where class, gender and age played out in steam and silence. Everyone has a role. Everyone knows the pecking order. You're a commoner, probably a merchant apprentice or a low-ranking artisan. So you sit near the back where the water's cooled a bit and the steam doesn't rise quite as thick. Up front, closest to the fire vent, is a seated elder. His back straight despite the heat, his towel folded neatly beside him like origami. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't need to. He's the alpha of this bathhouse, has been for years, maybe decades. If he clears his throat, you listen. If he leaves, everyone else suddenly finds themselves feeling done too. Historians still debate just how rigid this hierarchy really was. Some argue that bathhouses were egalitarian sanctuaries, where samurai and peasants could sit as equals, stripped of their armour and robes. Others say the pecking order was unmistakable, reinforced by glances, posture and steam placement. Maybe it depended on the neighbourhood. Or maybe, like most things, it was a bit of both. A samurai might wander in from time to time, but he wouldn't act like a samurai here. He'd leave his swords at the entrance, of course. That was law. But even without blades, status clung to people like damp towels. You could spot it in the way someone carried their bucket or nodded too stiffly. You could hear it in the awkward silence that followed their arrival. A samurai might not need to say anything, but everyone would hear it anyway. You try not to draw attention. You keep your movements minimal, just sitting, soaking, slowly cooking like a nervous dumpling. You begin to notice the way the bath itself is arranged. The hottest point is near the fire vent, usually claimed by elders or long-timers. The centre is for those with something to prove. Young men, loud labourers, the occasional overly enthusiastic visitor who doesn't understand the etiquette yet and will probably get a passive-aggressive cough within minutes. And the coolest areas, toward the edges, are where newcomers and outliers gather. You're there. So is a tired-looking man with ink-stained fingers, maybe a woodblock printer. A carpenter wipes his brow. No one speaks, but somehow you all share an unspoken understanding. We are the background actors in this silent drama. Quirky moment in coming. Some bathhouses in Edo had steam rooms attached. Tiny cedar-lined chambers where patrons could sit in total darkness and sweat in silence before even touching the bathwater. Think of it like a sauna crossed with a confession booth, minus the priest but with the guilt. You glance toward one such room now. The door creaks open and a man emerges, glistening and dazed, as if he's been whispering secrets to the steam itself. He nods at no one in particular, ties his towel back around his waist, and disappears into the main bath without a word. You wonder what he saw in there. Maybe nothing. Maybe too much. Your thoughts wander. You realise you haven't actually relaxed yet. It's difficult when you're balancing social tension and first-degree burns. Still, there's something hypnotic about the repetition of it all. Every person here has done this thousands of times. You will too. It's not just a bath, it's a ritual, a routine, a reset. And then, breaking the rhythm, someone stands. All heads turn, just a fraction. It's subtle. A young man, maybe 18, steps carefully out of the bath, bowing slightly toward the front as he does. Respect. Always. He dries quickly with his towel, wrings it out into his bucket, and steps to the side platform where people cool down before leaving. That part. Mandatory. You don't just walk out. You ease out. Let the sweat stop. Let your pulse settle. Sudden changes in temperature were thought to be dangerous. Your body needed time to return from the underworld of boiling water and human etiquette. One of the elders finally speaks. Just one word. You don't understand it. Dialect, maybe. But it carries weight. Everyone nods slightly. The man who just exited bows again, deeper this time, and steps out into the changing area. And now the hierarchy shifts. Everyone shuffles slightly, recalibrating. A new spot opens up. You think about taking it, but you don't move fast enough. Another bather slides in smoothly, claiming the position like a migrating bird finding the perfect branch. This too is part of the dance. You sigh quietly, careful not to let it sound like frustration. The bath isn't a spa, it's a classroom. You learn how to act, when to move, where not to sit. You learn who watches, who listens, and who, in the end, always gets the hottest water. You lean back again. The ceiling above you is dark with soot, the scent of cedar and charcoal clinging to your hair. Outside, the sky's beginning to brighten. You can hear the city waking. Vendors shouting, roosters reshouting, a child crying because someone made them eat radish for breakfast. The usual. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and try to pretend, for the briefest flicker of time, that this water doesn't smell faintly like mushrooms and regret, and somehow it helps. By now, the bathwater is just a little less terrifying. You've adjusted somewhat. Your skin still feels like a parboiled turnip, and the steam keeps curling into your nose like it's trying to write haiku in your sinuses. But hey, you're surviving. That's more than can be said for the guy who just stumbled out of the bathhouse, red as a lobster, clutching his bucket like it might protect his dignity. You give him a nod of solidarity as he vanishes behind the wooden partition. Poor soul probably stayed in too long, or not long enough. There's no winning here, really. Now let's talk about something you've definitely noticed by now. There's no soap, not a bar, not a bubble, not even a slippery suggestion of suds. And you, modern creature that you are, probably feel like you just walked into a horror movie. A clean horror movie, but unsettling all the same. Why? Because Edo bathhouses had a complicated relationship with soap. Or more accurately, no relationship at all. See, soap was considered problematic. Not because it didn't work. Oh, it worked. Too well, in fact. The residue from soap clogged up the primitive drainage systems under the bathhouses, which weren't exactly feats of engineering. Picture a series of tilted planks guiding wastewater into a gutter that might lead to a canal. If that canal backed up? Well, let's just say your clean water gets very philosophical very quickly. So the solution? Ban soap in public baths. Instead, you use the traditional method, a damp cotton towel and relentless scrubbing. Think of it like exfoliation with no mercy. You scrub your limbs raw until you raise a bit of steam from your own skin. That means it's working. Probably. Hopefully. Historians still argue whether this method was actually hygienic by modern standards. Some say friction alone was enough to remove surface dirt and sweat. Others point out the shared nature of the baths meant that microbes had VIP access to everyone's pores. Let's face it, if someone came in with athlete's foot, you were probably getting a free sample. But hygiene aside, this method meant something. Cleanliness in Edo wasn't just a health goal, it was a moral one. Being clean meant being respectable, and the ritual of scrubbing with your towel before entering the water was part of showing respect to others. You didn't want to sully the water, not because of germs, those wouldn't be understood for another couple centuries, but because polluting shared space was dishonourable. So you scrub, and when your skin feels more polished than a lacquer bowl, you splash cold water over yourself again. Rinse, repeat. And if you're really in the know, you bring a mix of finely ground rice bran wrapped in cloth, nuka bakuro. It's the closest thing to soap Edo bathers were allowed. It works like a gentle abrasive and leaves your skin feeling soft, and slightly like you've just rolled in dry cereal. Quirky tip. Wealthy households sometimes added sake to their wash water, believing it made the skin glow. Not that you can afford that. You'd sooner drink your bath water than waste rice wine on your elbows. Still, even with all this friction-based cleansing, not everyone agrees on what counts as clean. You look over and see a man furiously working a towel between his toes with the intensity of someone trying to erase their existence. Another guy, clearly on the lower end of the enthusiasm spectrum, gives himself 2 lazy passes over his arms and calls it a day. No one says anything. But the way they don't look at him. Brutal. There's no towel police, but there might as well be. Oh, and by the way, that towel, it never ever goes in the water. That's a cardinal sin. You keep it out, folded on your head, draped on your shoulder, clutched in one hand like a talisman. But dip it. You may as well scream, "I have no regard for community hygiene," in interpretive dance. You do not want to be that guy. You try balancing your towel on your head. Everyone else seems to do it effortlessly, like a little cotton crown. You attempt the same, and it immediately slides off into the bath water with a very loud plop. Dead silence. The old man near the front turns slowly. His expression doesn't change, but somehow his disappointment radiates across the room like a heat wave. You reach in, gingerly, quickly, and rescue your towel. You wring it out with shame. No one says anything, but you know. You know. Your soul takes psychic damage. You will carry this with you forever. Trying to recover, you sit quietly, towel folded crisply in your lap now, not even thinking of risking the head perch again. You close your eyes and attempt to fade into the steam, but your mind drifts. You wonder what people used to smell like in Edo. The constant bathing suggests they were pretty clean. Cleaner perhaps than their European contemporaries, who considered a bath once a month both suspicious and risky. Edoites, by contrast, often bathed daily, sometimes twice, especially during humid summers when the air felt like soup. Still, without soap, without deodorant, without shampoo. The standards were just different. Bodies smelled like people, like sweat, wood smoke, pickled vegetables, and damp cotton. You didn't smell good, you smelled normal. The idea of fragrance as something commercialized wouldn't fully catch on until later. For now, if you smelled strongly of anything, it meant you were either ill, rich, or had stood too close to the fermented bean curd stall. So here you are, half-boiled, partially scrubbed, sitting in silence among the towel-balancing elite. The rules are rigid, the water's unforgiving, and yet, there's a strange peace settling over you. Maybe it's the way the steam muffles every sound. Maybe it's the knowledge that, for these few minutes, everyone around you is just another body in the heat, stripped of rank, role, and even language. Or maybe you've just passed out slightly from dehydration. Honestly, hard to tell. Either way, your towel's out of the water now. You've learned your lesson. Tomorrow you'll try balancing it again. You've made it this far without being kicked out, scorched beyond recognition, or publicly humiliated again, though your soggy towel mishap still lives on in the bathhouse air like an unspoken cautionary tale. But don't get cocky. This next part, it's where things get really tricky. Because now you're not just trying to survive the heat, you're navigating the bathhouse hierarchy. And oh, it's not written down anywhere. You won't find a chart on the wall, but it's there. Subtle, silent, and absolutely unforgiving. Hierarchy in Edo bathhouses was a performance of invisible lines. Everything from where you sit, how you enter, how long you linger, to how much noise you make. It all tells the room who you are, or more importantly, who you're not. You think you can hide? Ha! Your bucket alone gives you away. Is it new? Worn? Made of cypress or cheap pine? Did you carry it confidently or juggle it like it was on fire? These things matter. You're a mid-level commoner at best. Maybe a rice merchant's apprentice with good posture. So you keep to the edges, you speak to no one, and if an older bather glances your way, you bow, slightly, just enough. Let's talk about seniority. This isn't just an age thing, it's bathhouse tenure. You could be 40, but if you just moved to this district last week, you're lower on the ladder than the 17-year-old who's been bathing here since he had 2 teeth and a bowl cut. The unspoken rule is simple. The front is power. The hot spot near the furnace vent? Reserved. Not officially, of course, but try claiming it and watch every head swivel like kabuki puppets. You'd be toast. Politely steamed toast. Historians still argue whether this informal stratification came from the Confucian ideals trickling through Edo society, or if it developed organically from the sheer number of people using shared spaces every day. Either way, the structure was ironclad, so much so it could withstand even an earthquake, which by the way Edo had a lot of, and it's not just men's bathhouses that ran on these rules. The same rigid systems extended to women's hours too, but more on that in a bit. For now, let's return to your awkward positioning. You're nestled against the back wall like a decorative gourd. You think you're invisible, but you're not. There's always someone watching, usually the bathhouse regulars who've turned observation into an Olympic sport. One false move, and the air gets just a little heavier. Like now. You didn't mean to lean against the wooden frame behind you, just a brief shoulder touch, really. But the creak was loud, and suddenly one of the elders turns. His eyebrow rises. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. You straighten instantly, as if jolted by lightning. You swear he smiled. Just slightly. There are no guards in here. No enforcers. The bathhouse polices itself. The pressure is social, cultural, and thoroughly efficient. A single disapproving sniff from a matronly bather in another time slot could crush your confidence like pickled daikon. Quirky footnote. Some bathhouses even had a bathhouse mother, an older woman, usually a widow, who helped run the place during women's hours, monitored etiquette, and sometimes even prepared herbal infusions for the bathwater. Think of her as a cross between a manager, a hall monitor, and the auntie who always knows when you're lying. Back in your corner, you begin to notice other roles in play. There's a man who brings his own ladle, long-handled, carved with tiny lotus blossoms. He never uses the public ones. He sits near the centre, and everyone gives him space. You don't know who he is, but you know he matters. Then there's the quiet pair of craftsmen who arrive together, never speak, but always take the same seats. You wonder if they're brothers, or just work together. Either way, their routine is synchronized like a tea ceremony. When one stands, the other follows. No need for words. There's even a child, maybe 9 or 10, sitting with his grandfather. The old man lets him dip his feet but not fully enter. He whispers instructions like a general passing on secret battle techniques. The child nods seriously. This is how bathhouse etiquette is passed down, not in lectures but in repetition. You, meanwhile, are learning the hard way. You try adjusting your towel on your shoulder, carefully. No sudden movements, no splashing. Splashing is for carp, not people. You wipe a bead of sweat from your brow and pretend it didn't drip into the water. Probably safe. Probably. Then, without warning, a newcomer enters. He's loud, brash, maybe drunk. He plops his bucket down too hard, water sloshing everywhere. His towel, oh no, goes right into the bath. You feel a collective inhale. No one speaks, but the silence tightens. And then, a miracle. The elder closest to the front clears his throat. The newcomer freezes. He looks around, confused, senses something's wrong. He glances at his towel. Slowly, very slowly, he pulls it out of the water. He sits, quieter now, smaller. One glance did what no shout could. That's bathhouse hierarchy in action. Silent correction, socially enforced, and always one cough away from total discipline. You feel oddly relieved. Not because he got put in his place, but because it wasn't you this time. This is the dance. Every morning, every bath, and even if the water changes, the rules stay the same. You're starting to understand now. It's not just about getting clean, it's about remembering who you are, where you stand, and how to carry yourself, even when your skin is about to boil off. You take a deep breath, hold it, let it out slow, 1 more minute, maybe 2, and you'll get out. But not too fast, not too eager. Leave too early and it looks like you couldn't handle it. Leave too late and you risk the dreaded bathhouse swoon. Yes, it's a real thing. Tomorrow you'll do better. Learn faster. Sit a little closer to the centre. Maybe, but not too close. Not yet. You're not there. Not yet. You've endured the heat, respected the hierarchy, and avoided towel-related disgrace, after the first mishap anyway. You're doing well, but now you come face to face with a rule that seems small, until it absolutely isn't. Because in Edo, if you show up to the bathhouse without the right gear, you may as well show up naked. Oh wait, you are naked, but that's beside the point. You were supposed to bring something very specific with you this morning. A wooden bucket and a modest towel. Not a full towel, not a fluffy bath sheet the size of a futon, just a simple, rectangular cotton cloth, called a tenugui. And if you forgot either, well, good luck. You shift in your spot and glance to your left. There's a man, probably a labourer, holding a splintered old bucket that looks like it's seen several generations of bath water. He's dipping it slowly, methodically, scooping water onto his shoulders with an elegance that would make a crane jealous. There's pride in his motions, even if the bucket leaks just a little at the bottom. That's okay, everyone leaks in here, eventually. You glance at your own bucket. Mid-tier. Decent. Cedarwood. Slightly stained. A faint scent of citrus from last season's shared bath. It's not flashy, but it's clean. And crucially, you have one. The man across from you, however, he's got nothing but a towel, and it's damp, fraying, and suspiciously limp. No bucket, no ladle. Just sitting there, pretending like he didn't notice the sideways glances. You watch him try to scoop water with just his hands. Rookie move, it splashes. Loudly. The water ripples in a way that sets off a low hum of judgment in the room. Subtle, but palpable. One man clears his throat, another adjusts his towel with just a bit too much flair. Bathhouse etiquette isn't enforced with violence or raised voices. It's enforced with the devastating power of polite shame. See, in Edo, the bath wasn't just about washing. It was a test of your preparedness, your self-respect, and your connection to the neighbourhood. Everyone brought their own supplies, a towel, a bucket, maybe even a wooden comb or a bar of nuka, that rice bran scrub we mentioned earlier. Showing up unprepared was the equivalent of forgetting your lines in a kabuki play. Everyone pretends it's fine, but no one forgets. Historians still argue how widespread these expectations were. Some accounts suggest poorer folks often shared buckets or borrowed from others, while others insist that a true Edouard wouldn't dream of doing so. The truth probably depends on the district, the day, and the crowd. You, meanwhile, cling to your bucket like it's a family heirloom. Let's break it down for a moment. The typical bathhouse kit in Edo included a tenugui, your all-purpose towel, washcloth, and modesty accessory. A wooden bucket, usually made of cedar or cypress. Optional, a small stool for scrubbing, if you're fancy. Optional, herbal sachets, comb, toothpick, and maybe even scented oil, if you're really fancy. The bucket wasn't just for show. It was your rinsing tool, your cooling vessel, and your post-bath air conditioning system. After leaving the main bath, many patrons would fill their bucket with cold water and pour it slowly over their bodies to prevent heat stroke. And yes, heat stroke was real. People fainted in bathhouses, sometimes daily. Those 40°C waters weren't forgiving, and ventilation wasn't exactly a priority in Edo design. Some bathhouses tried to compensate with ceiling slats, or fans made from folded paper, but mostly, you endured. Quirky side note, the wealthier neighbourhoods had bucket boys, children hired to carry their masters' buckets, wait outside during the bath, and then escort them home with fresh towels. Some even sang little jingles to announce their patron's exit. A bit much? Maybe. But if you had the money, why not show it? Back in your corner, you try to make yourself useful. You scoop warm water into your bucket and rinse your legs. You wring your towel out and fold it again, this time getting it to balance perfectly on your head. Redemption. Tiny victories. Suddenly you hear a commotion near the entrance. A woman's voice, Not angry, just firm. You catch a flash of colour, a kimono sleeve patterned with waves and chrysanthemums. She's arguing, gently, with one of the workers. Ah, she's early. It's not yet ladies' hour, but she's here, probably trying to claim a spot or prepare for a family member. The worker, a thin young man with the posture of a wilted daikon, bows repeatedly and gestures toward the door. She sighs, gives him a look sharp enough to trim bamboo, and retreats with grace. You'll see her again soon. And when you do, the energy of the entire bathhouse will change. But for now the rhythm returns, scooping, soaking, silence. You begin to notice how your own bucket has become part of your ritual. It's more than a tool. It's your companion in this ancient dance of water and heat. The steam curls gently from its rim. The wood creaks softly when you refill it. You find comfort in its presence, and when you finally rise to leave the bath, your bucket is the last thing you carry. Still warm, still full. It says something quiet to the others. I came prepared. I respected the water. I belong. And in a city where 1 million people share air, streets and boiling tubs, that's no small feat. You're dizzy, not dramatically, not in a fainting, collapsing, call the apothecary sort of way, but in a my bones might be soup sort of way. You step out of the bath slowly, water clinging to your legs, steam wrapping your face like a damp blanket. Every step is a soft slap of skin on slick wood, and you feel fragile, gently boiled. This isn't exaggeration. The water you just soaked in? That was nearly 48 degrees Celsius. That's a temperature most Westerners would associate with a malfunctioning jacuzzi or a lawsuit. But in Edo, that was normal. Some bathhouses even bragged about going hotter, and if you complained, they'd tell you to come back when your constitution was stronger. There's no cold plunge waiting, no refreshing peppermint mist. Just you, your wobbly legs, and the cooling area. A wooden bench near the exit where people sat to dry off, stop sweating and reconsider their life choices. You settle down, heart still thudding, as droplets slide down your neck. You try not to think about how your skin feels like it's humming. Now, here's the odd thing. For all its intensity, Edo citizens loved their hot baths. They'd soak even during the sticky, sweltering summer months, when just breathing felt like sipping warm miso. Why? Because sweating was considered purifying. The hotter the bath, the more you sweated. The more you sweated, the cleaner your soul. Or at least that was the logic. Historians still debate whether this obsession with heat came from traditional beliefs, imported Chinese medicine, or just plain competition. One theory suggests that because Japanese homes lacked interior heating, people became accustomed to using hot baths to store warmth in their bodies, essentially preheating themselves before enduring chilly evenings. There's even an Edo saying, "A bath before sleep is worth 2 futons." Considering how thin the futons were, this was both comforting and absolutely necessary. You sit, breathing slowly, watching steam curl up through the ceiling slats, and suddenly it hits you. This wasn't a relaxing bath. It was a challenge, a daily act of endurance, like running a marathon where instead of a medal you get skin that smells like damp cedar. A man nearby is stretching, not yoga style, just arms overhead, back cracking, letting the sweat drip off him in slow, dignified arcs. He's been doing this longer than you. He's not even red anymore. His skin has moved past boiled and into porcelain warrior territory. You glance around and realise something. Almost everyone is out of the bath now. Not because time's up, but because there's a rhythm. An invisible signal that pulses through the bathhouse, telling people when to enter, when to soak, and when to leave. It's not spoken, it's felt. Like steam telepathy. And you're just barely tuning into it. You hear the crackle of firewood again. The apprentice downstairs is feeding the furnace. The water will stay hot all day. In fact, it might get hotter. Morning bathers get the best temperature. By afternoon, the water's been reheated again and again, and the line between purification and slow cooking gets blurrier. Quirky fact time. There are records of bathhouses competing over who could keep the hottest bath. Signs outside would boast, "Fires stoked since sunrise," or "No cold water added today." One popular bathhouse in the Nihonbashi district was rumoured to boil an egg just by leaving it on the bench beside the tub. No one actually tested this, but still, the scalding temperature served a dual purpose. Not only did it test your grit, but it helped clean the water. In the absence of chemicals or filtration, heat was your disinfectant. If it could wilt cabbage, It could kill a few skin germs. Probably. You wipe your brow again, then carefully rise. Your legs are steadier now, a little. You make your way to the rinsing basin, a square trough of fresh water meant for a final splashdown. Not mandatory, but recommended. You dip your bucket, pour it over your shoulders, and finally feel that slight relief you've been craving. Like opening a window in a stuffy room. Outside the bath chamber you find your folded yukata, still slightly damp from earlier humidity, but dry enough to wear. You slip into it, towel draped around your neck like a badge of survival. You catch your reflection in a piece of polished copper nailed to the wall. You look drained, flushed, slightly wobbly, but also, weirdly, accomplished. You endured. You didn't faint. You only dropped your towel once. A good morning. You step into the changing area where others are drying off, chatting softly, avoiding eye contact in that polite semi-public way. The bathhouse is filling up again. You hear laughter from the entry hall. A group of young apprentices arrives, jostling each other, still wearing their work aprons. They're loud. Unbothered by rules, for now, they'll learn. You nod politely to the bathhouse worker sweeping the floor. He doesn't look up, but he sees you. He sees everyone. The bathhouse is his domain. He knows who stayed too long, who broke etiquette, who brought a new bucket this week. He is the guardian of the water's balance. You step outside, and the world hits you. The city is loud. Carts clatter down cobbled streets. A fish seller yells about today's best catch. Roosters crow. Someone's baby is wailing like it's just remembered taxes exist. The smells are sharper too. Soy sauce, river muck, grilled eel, burnt charcoal. The bath's peace is gone in an instant. But something else happens too. You're clean. Not just in a physical sense, but mentally reset. Like you've washed away yesterday's dust, stress and shame. The sweat will return, of course. The city will stick to your skin before you even reach the next alley. But for this moment, you feel lighter. Maybe that's why they did it. Every day. Every single boiling morning. Even when it hurt. Even when it was awkward. Even when your towel betrayed you. Because stepping out of that bath meant starting over. A small, silent rebirth. A way of saying, I made it. I'm still here. Let's begin again. And now, you have a full day of chaotic Edo life ahead of you. But you'll face it clean. You haven't been back on the street for more than 2 minutes before you realise something sobering. If you hadn't bathed today, someone would have noticed. Not because you'd stink, though you would, but because not bathing in Edo isn't just a hygiene issue. It's a legal one. You walk past a merchant sweeping the steps in front of his shop, his sleeves rolled up, his face already damp with morning sweat. He glances at you, clocking your freshly steamed glow. That look, that subtle nod. It's not friendliness. It's approval. You've done your civic duty. Because in Edo, daily cleanliness wasn't optional. It was mandated by law, or, more accurately, by a sprawling network of ordinances and social codes designed to keep this overflowing wooden metropolis from turning into a giant stinking tinderbox of disease and disorder. Let's back up for a moment. Edo wasn't just big, it was bursting. Over 1 million people crammed into a city built mostly of paper, wood and rice straw. Add in narrow streets, minimal ventilation, and more fish guts than you'd think possible, and you've got a recipe for chaos. But somehow, Edo was remarkably orderly. Why? Because the Tokugawa shogunate made cleanliness a social imperative. In fact, historical records show that neighborhood officials, called machibugyo, were expected to enforce regulations that extended beyond taxes and crime. Public health, sanitation, fire prevention, and bathing habits were all part of their purview. Did a family let their trash pile up? Were their kids unwashed and barefoot? Were you starting to smell sour? That was all grounds for inspection and correction. Historians still argue just how strict these cleanliness laws really were. Some suggest they were mostly advisory, with punishments limited to fines or social shaming. Others believe they were enforced aggressively, particularly during summer months when disease risks soared and tempers ran hotter than the bathwater. You round the corner past a tofu vendor and see a small wooden sign posted on a wall. It's old, but the characters are still legible. A city notice. Be clean, bathe regularly, respect your neighbours. Simple, chilling. This wasn't a society where individual freedom trumped communal well-being. In Edo, your personal habits were everyone's business. If you didn't bathe, your neighbours might file a complaint. If your house began to smell, you might get a warning. And if you ignored the warning? Well, the local constable had a bamboo cane and a whole afternoon free, and don't think you could bathe privately to avoid scrutiny. For most citizens, the public bathhouse was the only option. Private baths were rare and usually reserved for the wealthy or for households with enough servants to heat water and haul it in buckets. For you, it was the public tub, or nothing. And nothing wasn't an option. Quirky fact. During particularly hot summers, some neighbourhoods organised forced bath days, encouraging or strongly insisting that every resident cleanse themselves on the same day. They believed this would cut down on disease and reduce tension caused by, shall we say, social odours. This emphasis on cleanliness didn't just apply to bodies. Streets were swept daily. Waste was collected regularly and used to fertilise farms on the outskirts. Even animals had their place. Dogs, cats and birds roamed freely. But if they disrupted the harmony, someone was expected to handle it. And speaking of harmony, bathhouse attendance was a visible signal of whether you were upstanding or suspicious. Regulars were recognised. Absentees were noticed. So if someone like you skipped a few days, people would talk. Not necessarily out loud, but you'd feel it in the shifting glances. The extra space around you in crowds, the way the tofu man didn't nod that morning. And then, bam, a visit from the neighbourhood headman, smiling too politely, asking if everything is all right at home. It's easy to forget in our world of private bathrooms and individually scented soaps how public cleanliness used to be. In Edo, your hygiene was part of your identity, part of your public duty, and the rules weren't just enforced from above, they were enforced horizontally. Everyone watched everyone else. Because when your entire neighbourhood was built out of flammable materials, your neighbour's negligence could burn your house down, literally. So when you bathed that morning, you didn't just clean yourself, you passed a test, a social check mark. One more box ticked on the list of not causing trouble in a city full of wooden buildings, hot tempers, and very little personal space. You pass a group of children now, 2 boys arguing over who gets to push the cart of radishes. Their sleeves are rolled up, and their arms are streaked with dirt, but you can see it. Under the dust, they're clean. Someone bathed them. Someone made sure. You turn onto a quieter street, where laundry lines sway gently in the breeze. Yukata flutter like sleepy flags. On one porch, an old woman is scrubbing a bucket, methodically, rhythmically, as if it's a sacred act. Maybe it is. There's something meditative about the whole thing. Wake up, walk to the bathhouse, strip away yesterday's grime, boil yourself half-conscious, scrub every inch, return home with clean skin, a clear mind, and no fear of social exile. Do it again tomorrow. You realise now that the bath wasn't optional. It was a ritual of belonging, a daily recommitment to life in the world's biggest wooden pressure cooker, and if you missed it, you might as well skip paying your taxes or spit in the rice barrel. Not recommended. So next time someone tells you Edo was cleaner than 18th century Europe, they're probably right. But it wasn't just because of infrastructure. It was because people were terrified of smelling bad and getting publicly roasted for it. Tomorrow, you'll wake again to sweat and charcoal and fish oil. And once more, you'll march yourself to that boiling cedar tub and soak until your ears ring. Not because you love it, but because if you don't, everyone will know. You glance at the sun now peeking above the rooftops, but the real clock that governs this moment isn't celestial. It's the rotation schedule. Because soon, the bathhouse you just left will echo with a different rhythm, a softer one. The steam will shift, the conversation will drop to a hush, and the staff will change the signs. It's time for Women's Hour. You're already gone by the time it starts, of course. Edo customs didn't mix genders in public bathhouses, at least not after the mid-18th century. But you've heard the sounds before, the murmur of slippers on wet wood, the subdued clatter of buckets, and that sudden silence that settles like fog when women enter. Edo bathhouses followed strict time separation, men in the early hours, women after. This wasn't always the case. Early Edo bathhouses were often co-ed, especially in rural areas. But rising urbanization, tightening morality laws, and pressure from Confucian ethics gradually pushed the shogunate to segregate the baths by gender. Historians still argue when exactly the split became standardized. Some point to the mid-1700s, when city officials started mandating modesty partitions and alternating schedules. Others note that even after laws were passed, many bathhouses ignored them, especially in poorer districts. Enforcement, as always, depended on how loudly someone complained. Today, though, the rules are followed, mostly. The women enter just as the steam begins to thin. The fire beneath the bath has cooled a degree or two, still hot, but no longer scalding. The temperature, some say, was intentionally dropped before women's hour. Whether it was out of concern or condescension, no one really knows. You've never seen it directly, of course, but the bathhouse staff talk. The rhythm of women's bathing is different, slower, less assertive, but far more attentive. The gossip, however, it boils! Quirky fact, bathhouses in Edo were some of the only places where women could gather outside the home without supervision, and that freedom, limited though it was, made them hotbeds of information exchange. Recipes, midwife recommendations, marriage proposals, family secrets, it all flowed with the steam. A woman scrubbing her back might hear about a neighbour's son joining the fire brigade. Another rinsing her hair might learn who's been hiding debts. A good listener left with cleaner skin and an arsenal of social currency. You pass by the outer wall of the bathhouse just as a small line forms. 3 women, all in patterned yukata, clutching buckets and towels. They speak softly, but their laughter leaks out between phrases like steam through loose floorboards. One of them, probably the eldest, pulls her towel over her head like a scarf. She's missing a tooth, but her voice is strong as she scolds the younger woman beside her for forgetting her Nuka Bukuro scrub again. Inside, the bathhouse shifts. The sliding door creaks closed. The men are gone. The floor is wiped, benches are rinsed, fresh buckets stacked neatly against the wall. The bathhouse workers bow as the women enter. And now a new ritual begins. In many ways, women's bathing was even more codified than men's, not in terms of hierarchy, but in ritual behaviour. There was an expectation of discretion, of quiet. A thin curtain was drawn across the outer entrance. No peeking, no eavesdropping. Not that anyone would dare unless they wanted a rice scoop to the head. Inside, women bathed with precision. First rinse, then scrub, then soak, just like the men. But there was an added focus on hair. Long, often unbound for bathing, it had to be washed, wrung, and sometimes oiled before rebraiding. That process took time, patience, sisterhood, and scrutiny. Because even here, the bath wasn't just about cleaning, it was about image. A woman's appearance in public, especially in the all-seeing steam of the bathhouse, could affect her social standing. A flaking scalp, whispers, calloused heels, snickers, a mole in the wrong spot. Suddenly your cousin's marriage prospects are in jeopardy. Still, despite all that, bathhouses were safe spaces. A woman could roll her eyes about her husband, could ask advice from someone older, could close her eyes and pretend for just 10 minutes that the world beyond the paper walls didn't exist. One fringe detail from surviving records. In some districts, women's bath hours ended with tea. Not officially, but a few proprietors, usually older widows running the place, would offer barley tea to lingering patrons, especially if the crowd was small. It was a quiet act of hospitality, maybe even rebellion. A way to say, you're welcome here. Stay a little longer. You imagine the scene now, a low hum of conversation, the sound of water ladled gently over shoulders, a child, maybe 3, dipping their toes into the water as a grandmother holds them steady, the light filtering in soft amber through steamed windows. Peace, warmth, not luxury but dignity. And outside, you, already back in the city's chaos. Your skin still tingles, your legs still ache, but you're clean. And for now, that means you're okay. You turn another corner, but the scent of the bathhouse lingers. Cedar and charcoal and something you can't name. You wonder if they're laughing inside. You hope they are. And you hope the tea is strong. You've walked a few more blocks, shaking the last of the bathhouse fog from your bones, when it suddenly hits you. That place, the creaking wooden box of boiling water and silent judgment, isn't just a bathhouse. It's a miniature society. And sitting at the centre of it all, both literally and figuratively, is one person, the Yuya, or bathhouse master. Don't let the humble title fool you. The Yuya isn't just stoking fires and collecting coins. He's the heartbeat of the operation, the watchdog, the referee, and quite often the unspoken mayor of the neighbourhood. Without him, the whole delicate ecosystem of scalding water and social rules collapses like a soggy rice cracker. You think back to this morning's bath. The Yuya had barely said a word, but he was everywhere. The faint knock when he entered the changing room, his bowed head as he refilled someone's water basin, the way he somehow noticed your towel mishap without ever seeming to look at you. That's his power. He's not watching, you just feel watched, and that's by design. The Yuya's job wasn't merely logistical. Sure, he kept the fire going, replaced buckets, and monitored the water temperature, but he also maintained the bathhouse's social equilibrium. He knew who came daily, who paid on time, who lingered too long, who slipped in during the wrong hours, or started talking a little too loudly near the rinse buckets. In some ways, the Yuya was part monk, part middle manager, and part spy. He balanced customer service with discipline. He enforced unspoken rules not with punishment, but with presence. Just seeing him polish a ladle in the corner made people sit up straighter. Historians still argue whether Yuya roles were formally appointed or simply inherited. Some records suggest a father might pass down his bathhouse to a son. Others hint at guilds, loose associations of bathhouse families who helped regulate prices and standards across a district. The truth probably varies depending on the neighbourhood. What's clear is this: the best Yuya were respected. The bad ones? Out of business before you could say lukewarm scandal. Quirky fact: a few Yuya became minor celebrities, known for running the cleanest, hottest, or most luxurious bathhouses. They'd earn reputations that stretched across wards. People would travel districts just to experience the famously glassy water of Mr. Yamada's cedar tub, or the 7-herb infusion at old lady Tsuneko's back alley bath. And yes, some bathhouses were woman-run, rare but not unheard of, especially if the bath catered to women or operated during unconventional hours. In those cases, the Yuya might be a yuban, a term used less frequently but still meaning the one in charge of the bath. But status came with pressure. The Yuya had to be a firemaster, literally. Every morning before sunrise, he and his apprentices stoked the bathhouse's furnace, a small inferno tucked beneath the tub where giant cauldrons heated the water above. One mistake, and you'd scald the patrons, or worse, burn the entire place down. Edo was famously flammable. Entire neighbourhoods vanished in fires. The Flowers of Edo, they were called, both poetically and tragically. Many of those fires began in bathhouses. A single spark, a furnace left too long, a rogue ember floating up through the paper walls. Boom, half the district gone. So being a Yuya wasn't just about hot water, it was about not destroying everything. You recall seeing a little shrine tucked in the corner of the bathhouse this morning, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. A tiny fox statue, a sprig of pine, and an offering of dried rice, probably a local deity of fire or protection. The Yuya must have placed it there, a small ritual to keep the flames friendly. He'd have cleaned the floors before dawn too, wiped down the walls, inspected the cedar planks for mould or rot, refilled the rinsing basins, checked the temperature with the back of his hand, not a thermometer. He'd know if it was right, just by feel. That's the kind of intuition you earn when you've done something every single day for decades. You remember watching him nod to a group of elders this morning. Just a nod, but it carried weight. He probably knew each of their stories. When their arthritis got worse, whose son had moved to Osaka, which one always needed the second hottest corner seat but never asked for it directly. And he knew you too, not by name, but he noticed your towel plop, the way you hesitated at the water's edge, the flicker of panic when you touched water hotter than your nervous system expected. He didn't say a word, but he was there, keeping it all together. You pass another bathhouse now, not yours, a little smaller, shabbier, the firewood stacked sloppily, the windows slightly askew. You wonder about their Yuya. Does he command the same authority? Does he greet patrons by name? Does he bow with precision? Or is he just getting by, coasting on warm water and loose rules? You wouldn't go there, not just out of loyalty, but because the vibe matters. In Edo, the bathhouse wasn't interchangeable. It was yours or it wasn't, like a barber or a shrine, or a neighbourhood noodle stall where they know just how you like your daikon sliced. You round a corner and hear a boy calling out selling firewood. You wonder if he delivers to your bathhouse. You wonder how early the Yuya has to get up to meet him, and you make a silent note to nod tomorrow. Not just the polite customer nod, but the good job not setting us all on fire nod, because now you know. The water didn't just get hot by accident. You've returned home now, towel drying on the line, bucket scrubbed and inverted neatly near the door. The sun is higher, the noise outside has doubled, and your morning bath feels like a distant fever dream. But just before you settle into your first chore, or maybe your first bowl of rice, you pause, remembering a detail that always rankled you a little. Some people never had to go through that ordeal. Because while you were hovering on the edge of a boiling tub this morning, carefully navigating social protocols and praying your eyebrows wouldn't melt, someone else across town was reclining in a private bath sipping plum tea with perfumed water, and possibly a hired attendant scrubbing their back. In Edo, cleanliness may have been a public duty, but comfort, that was a luxury. Welcome to the other side of the bathhouse divide, the side you'll probably never see, unless you're born into a merchant family with serious coin, part of a well-connected artisan guild, or one of the city's elite entertainers, or a rich widow with impeccable taste in cedar. Because yes, there were private baths, not common, but very real, tucked into the back rooms of large homes, or reserved wings of inns catering to wealthy travellers, or even part of pleasure houses in Yoshiwara where bathing wasn't just a necessity, it was a performance. These private baths didn't follow the same rules. They weren't scalding, they weren't communal, and they definitely didn't smell like 5 generations of boiled foot sweat. Instead, the water was often infused with scented herbs or citrus peels, poured over stones warmed gently in the hearth, and instead of scrubbing yourself like a panicked eel, you'd be gently exfoliated by an attendant trained to make you feel like royalty. Historians still debate how widespread these baths were. Some suggest they were mostly confined to the homes of hatamoto, samurai in service to the shogun, and high-end courtesans. Others believe even some wealthy merchants had private tubs built, small but deep, lined with lacquered hinoki wood and serviced by household staff. You've probably passed one of these private setups without knowing it. A small wooden extension on the back of a house, a chimney that smokes at odd hours, a cart delivering bundles of yuzu or dried chrysanthemum petals in little drawstring bags. Quirky detail. One merchant in the Nihonbashi district reportedly had seasonal bath scents, ginger and orange peel in winter, sandalwood in spring, and mint leaves in summer. Neighbours would catch a whiff of the steam and sigh. Jealousy, cloaked in admiration. But here's the real kicker. Some of these elite folks didn't even scrub themselves. They were bathed, not because they were infirm, but because it was fashionable. In upscale pleasure quarters, male clients would often be washed by the courtesans, an intimate, pre-scripted ritual involving soft cloths, artful towel placement, and water just warm enough to melt a man's pride. It wasn't sexual per se, not always, but it was theatrical, a display of gentility, of control, of being seen. Imagine a full-body spa treatment, except in a world without shampoo or French cucumbers. It was indulgent, dramatic, and entirely unattainable to most Edwaites. You, of course, get none of this. Your bath is a test, not a treat. A furnace-fed cauldron where you compete for elbow room with an old man who's memorized your weak spots. The scent of your bath water is skin, yours, the soap, your own despair. But here's the twist. Despite all that luxury, despite the servants, the herbs, the cushioned stools and dried flower sachets, the public bathhouse was still the soul of Edo bathing culture, because private baths, no matter how lovely, didn't offer what the sento did. Ritual, rhythm, routine, shared humanity wrapped in steam. The merchant in his perfumed tub might be physically cleaner, but you, crouched in the scalding water beside your neighbours, walked out with something more, resilience. There's a sort of spiritual grit that comes from enduring discomfort alongside others, from understanding when to stay silent, from nodding at the regulars without needing to speak, from knowing how hot is too hot and how quiet is just right. Still, it doesn't stop you from imagining it. A soft splash, not a slap. Water scented with plum blossoms, a folding screen painted with cranes. No towel judgment, no hierarchy, just floating. You picture yourself there, just for a second. Then someone outside yells about fish prices, and a rooster breaks into song like it's headlining a festival. A neighbour dumps a bucket of water into the street with the force of someone avenging a grudge. Reality reasserts itself. Your bath was hot, cramped, brutal. But you earned it. Tomorrow, you'll go again. And when your bucket clinks against the bath's wooden edge, it'll do so with pride. You've just about shaken off the morning haze when you pass two men chatting near a row of laundry poles. One rolls up his sleeve, revealing a swirling ink design on his forearm, a dragon mid-flight. The other quickly tugs his own sleeve down, glancing both ways like he's hiding a secret. Ah, tattoos. In today's world, they might say artist, motorcyclist, or deeply committed barista. But in Edo, that ink marked you, sometimes literally, sometimes socially, and in a bathhouse setting it said everything before you even opened your mouth. Tattoos in Edo were complicated. On one hand, they were celebrated as art. On the other, they were a punishment, a warning, and occasionally a death sentence in polite company. You see, public baths weren't just about heat and hierarchy, they were about visibility. Stripped of your clothing, you had nothing to hide, except perhaps the truth inked across your back. In fact, for a long stretch of Edo history, tattoos were mandated for criminals. Caught stealing rice? Tattoo. Disobey your lord? Tattoo. Get into a brawl and lose the fight in your social grace? Well, guess what? Tattoo. Usually black ink, often a simple symbol on the arm or forehead, varying by region. Each design screamed, this person messed up. These weren't stylish sleeves or delicate cherry blossoms. These were warnings, and they were permanent. Even if you turned your life around, that mark remained. So when you stepped into a public bathhouse and removed your robe, everyone saw your past. Historians still debate how widely these criminal tattoos were used, and how often they overlapped with the rise of irezumi, or decorative body art. Some say the two grew side by side, others claim they existed in separate social lanes entirely, only intersecting in places like the bathhouse, where flesh met water and secrets couldn't hide. Quirky detail, labourers and firemen, particularly the Ikeishi, Edo's legendary fire brigades, were among the first to popularise decorative tattoos. They saw them as symbols of strength, loyalty, and community. Their bodies became canvases of protection charms, fierce animals, and legendary figures. Imagine being boiled alive in bathwater beside a guy with a full-body tattoo of Fudomyu glaring down from his shoulder blades. Not intimidating at all. You'd think, with tattoos so widespread in certain circles, bathhouses would adapt. But no, many banned them outright, or at least pretended to. Signs near the doors warned against undesirable marks. Patrons who didn't like what they saw might quietly complain to the yuya, who could then, very politely, ask the tattooed guest to leave. But here's the catch. These bans weren't always enforced equally. A young apprentice with a snake coiled on his shoulder might be tolerated in a rougher part of town, especially if he paid in full and kept quiet. A travelling merchant with a small floral tattoo might get scowled at but still be allowed to bathe. A known criminal with a forehead mark, though, he'd be lucky to get past the threshold. And then there were the Yakuza. Not the suited-up gangsters of modern cinema, but Edo's early underworld. Gamblers, enforcers, shady contractors who ran gambling dens, loan operations, and, yes, some bathhouses themselves. For them, tattoos were badges of honour. The more ink, the deeper the loyalty. A full-back tattoo wasn't just for decoration, it was a declaration. You remember a bathhouse tale whispered between apprentices once? A man enters, quiet, polite, strips off his robe to reveal ink from neck to thigh, waves, skulls, chrysanthemums, a demon riding a tiger. No one dares speak. He bathes, never makes eye contact, leaves without a word, and no one asks his name. True? Who knows? But the bathhouse is where those stories lived. You never forget the first time you saw a tattoo like that. Not a criminal mark. A full, sweeping, magnificent artwork, clearly done by hand, probably with bamboo needles and centuries of pain. You stared a little too long. He looked back. You've been avoiding eye contact with anyone under 40 ever since. But here's something interesting. Not all tattoos were feared. Some were even spiritual, protective. Women sometimes had small charms inked into their wrists or ankles. Hidden, personal, meaningful. A single symbol to guard against illness or misfortune. Rare, yes, but not unheard of. Still, the bathhouse had one rule above all. Your body tells your story. And that story becomes public the moment the yukata drops. So even now, walking through town, you carry a subtle awareness. Not just of your marks, or lack thereof, but of others. You've seen elders with old, faded ink that speaks of a life harder than yours. You've seen travellers with floral designs whose meanings are lost to time. You've seen symbols of faith, of rebellion, of punishment, and all of them eventually end up in the water. Tomorrow you'll return, you'll bow, you'll scrub, you'll sweat beside a fisherman with phoenix feathers winding down his arm, and you'll sit a little straighter, not just from the heat, but from the understanding that everyone enters the bath equal. But no one arrives without baggage, and some of it is carved in ink. Later that afternoon, as you rest in the shade of a wooden awning sipping cool barley tea, you overhear two men talking, not loudly, but with just enough intent to draw attention. They aren't discussing rice prices or last night's windstorm. They're talking about someone important, who was seen at the bathhouse. And that's when it clicks. The Cento isn't just a place to get clean. It's a place where information flows, quietly, efficiently, and without a trace of paperwork. Because in Edo, the bathhouse is also a kind of underworld post office, a meeting ground, a whisper chamber, a marketplace of overheard truths and veiled agendas, masked by steam and the sound of water slapping against wood. You think back to earlier this morning. There was a man in the corner. Didn't say a word, didn't seem to bathe much either. Just sat there, observing. You thought he was odd. But maybe he wasn't just another silent sufferer of scalding water and modesty-induced stress. Maybe he was listening. Maybe he was collecting. Bathhouses weren't just for relaxation or ritual. They were arenas of subtle negotiation. In a city with no email, no phones, and no LinkedIn profiles, you had two places to conduct business without formal interference: the tea house and the bath. But in the bath, no one could wear armour. Literally. You left your swords at the door. Even a high-ranking samurai had to strip down to skin and bone, sink into water shared by fishmongers and rice peddlers, and maybe, if he was very, very subtle, strike a deal. Historians still argue how common this was. Some claim it was rare, just a handful of clever merchants and bureaucrats using the bath as a neutral ground. Others suggest it was a daily occurrence, masked by routine and steam. After all, what better place to whisper about land contracts or grain futures than shoulder deep in boiling cedar water? One thing is certain. The bathhouse was one of the few spaces in Edo where social boundaries blurred, if only slightly. You might not speak to someone higher up the social ladder, but you saw them, and if you were smart, you noticed who they spoke to. Quirky footnote. In some neighbourhoods, bathhouse walls were fitted with small peephole slats, not for voyeurism, hopefully, but for eavesdropping. An apprentice might be stationed outside to catch wind of gossip, useful for a boss who wanted to keep tabs on competitors, or even pass a rumour of his own through a casual slip of the tongue. That man sitting quietly this morning? He might have been a Kagami, a shadow watcher, not a spy in the dramatic sword-flashing sense, but a listener, a collector of murmurs. These unofficial agents weren't trained warriors. They were clerks, scribes, failed students, anyone with good memory and quiet eyes. The shogunate used them sometimes. So did merchants. Even courtesans kept a few on retainer to track who was visiting whom. It wasn't always malicious. Sometimes it was about opportunity. If you heard someone was opening a new sack shop 2 streets over, maybe you reached out to supply the barrels. If you learned that a certain rice dealer was falling behind on payments, maybe you avoided extending credit next month. Even a brief overheard sentence, "He's moved his apprentice to Ueno," could shape a business decision. Because in a city where you're rarely alone, and words hang in the steam like incense, everything you say might be heard. You begin to realise that everyone plays a role in the bathhouse network, whether they know it or not. The old man grumbling about fish taxes? He might be venting, but his neighbour's cousin works for the port. That boy rinsing buckets near the back. He delivers charcoal and hears which houses are burning more fuel, meaning they're housing guests, important ones. And then there are the bathhouse workers themselves. Don't be fooled. They're not just pouring water and sweeping floors. They hear everything. They know who arrives together, who leaves separately, who suddenly changes their rinse routine or brings scented oil they can't afford. In many ways, they're the city's most underappreciated intelligence network. They might not say anything, but the Yuya knows who's avoiding eye contact this week. He knows who paid in full, who borrowed a towel, who skipped a bath 2 days in a row. He knows who's hiding something. Back in your corner, sipping tea, you start replaying conversations you half heard that morning. Was that merchant really just visiting from Kyoto, or was he scouting trade routes? And that quiet man with ink-stained fingers, was he a writer, or just pretending? It makes your head spin, but also, it thrills you. There's a pulse in this city beating under the wood and rice paper, and part of it lives in the bath. Hidden deals, secret alliances, whispers that shape districts. Tomorrow you'll soak again, maybe near the back, maybe beside someone new, and this time you'll listen just a little closer. Because in Edo the bath doesn't just clean you, it connects you. You're drifting through the city now, half lost in steam-drenched memories, when a high-pitched wail pierces the air. Not a cat, not a street vendor, definitely not a ghost, unless that ghost hates bathwater and has the lungs of a taiko drum. No, that's the unmistakable cry of a child in a bathhouse. You wince in sympathy. Bathing may be routine for you now, hot, painful, awkward, yes, but survivable. But for kids in Edo, it's a trial by fire, sometimes literally. You pause near a corner where 3 young boys run squealing down a lane, still dripping wet, towels flapping like battle flags. One of them is missing a sandal. Another's head is still soapy. The oldest, probably about 10, is holding a bucket upside down over his face, pretending to be a samurai. Ah, the post-bath chaos, a familiar sight. But let's rewind. Imagine waking up at dawn in a wooden house where insulation is a myth, and your futon is damp from both sweat and last night's accidental tea spill. Your grandmother grumbles that it's time to go to the bathhouse, and before you can protest, you're scooped up, wrapped in a ragged towel, and marched barefoot down a cold, uneven street. Now imagine being dunked, without ceremony, into water that feels like it came from the core of the earth. No toys, no bubbles, no mercy. Welcome to childhood in Edo. Bathing children was less a bonding moment and more a communal wrestling match. Mothers, older siblings and grandmothers all took turns wrangling little limbs, scrubbing muddy knees, and subduing escape attempts with the calm efficiency of seasoned generals. Quirky fact, there's artwork from the Edo period, ukiyo-e prints, showing bathhouse scenes with kids being bathed while crying, fidgeting or splashing dramatically, often to the amusement of older patrons. In one famous print, a grandmother holds a child upside down by the ankles, dunking him like a laundry rag. The caption, something like, "Summer cleansing, tantrum included." But crying or not, children had to bathe. The same social expectations that applied to adults were passed down like worn sandals. A dirty child didn't just reflect laziness, it suggested a family lacked discipline, order, or respect for the community. And in a world where neighbours were closer than shadows, reputation mattered. So the bath became a classroom, a dojo, a moral forge. Historians still argue whether bathing really improved child health in Edo, considering the heat, shared water, and lack of soap. Some say it helped prevent skin conditions and kept lice infestations low. Others note that children often left the bath with flushed cheeks and mild burns, immediately rolling in dust and sweat on the way home. Either way, it wasn't about comfort, it was about conformity. The process usually began with a rinse, a cold splash to shock them into stillness. Then came the scrubbing, feet first, then arms, then the dreaded back. No soap, just a cloth, and the sheer willpower of the adult in charge. Some kids were quiet about it. Others wailed like they were auditioning for a kabuki tragedy. Once clean, or clean enough, they'd be lowered into the bath. Not too deep, not too close to the centre. Usually tucked beside a parent's leg where they'd cling like overcooked noodles and occasionally scream when someone splashed too close. The noise? Accepted. Tolerated even. But only for a few minutes. If a child cried too long or too loudly, a stern glance from the nearest elder usually fixed that. Or in worse cases, a gentle scolding, "The water is not the enemy. Now be quiet or the koi spirits will pull you under." And that worked. Sometimes. There was also a strange equality to it. In the bathhouse, all children were everyone's business. A neighbour might offer to help wash your child's hair if you were struggling. A grandmother might warn another child to sit properly. It was chaotic, loud, messy, but also strangely communal. You think back to your own first bath. The heat, the sting, the terror of slipping. The moment when an older bather gently offered a ladle of warm water to rinse your face. You never forgot that kindness. Or the silent approval that followed when you didn't cry. That's how it starts. One bath at a time, one lesson at a time. Quirky detail. Some wealthier families hired special child bathers, usually older siblings or young servants trained specifically to bathe children. These bathers knew how to regulate water temperature, how to soothe fussy toddlers, and how to rinse hair without soap stinging the eyes. Their skill was prized, their patience legendary. But for most families, it was hands-on parenting, often 2 generations tag-teaming one slippery, protesting child. And of course, there were the bold kids, the ones who laughed in the heat, who learned the social rhythms early, who balanced towels on their heads before they could spell their own name. Bathhouse prodigies. You watch one now, marching past with the exaggerated confidence of someone who just survived steam and soapless scrubbing. His towel is tied around his waist like a warrior sash. He's maybe 7. Already cooler than you. He'll grow into his own bathhouse habits, his own corner, maybe even inherit his father's bucket one day. Because in Edo, bathing wasn't just a moment, it was a milestone. And like every great ritual, it had to start somewhere, preferably with a little crying, a lot of splashing, and an audience of mildly amused elders. The day stretches on. Edo's streets swell with movement, vendors shouting about miso paste and turnips, fire watchers scanning rooftops, and children darting between sandals like human sparrows. But in the corner of your mind, you're already thinking about tomorrow's bath. And why? Because tomorrow's water will smell like ginger, or maybe iris. Depends on the season. You see, Edo bathhouses didn't just school you into cleanliness, they followed nature's calendar too. There was a rhythm to the year, and it didn't just bring blossoms or snow. It brought scented baths, ritualized, thematic, as much for the soul as for the skin. You'd know the season not just by the changing leaves, but by what floated in your bathwater. Take early spring, for example. Around the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, Children's Day, the bathhouse might toss in bundles of shobu or iris leaves. Their long sword-like blades drifted in the steaming water, believed to ward off evil spirits and bring vitality. Iris has a sharp, slightly spicy scent, and it fills the room like herbal thunder. Then there's winter, when ginger rules the bath. Sharp, warming, pungent. A perfect pairing for frigid mornings when your breath crystallizes and even your towel seems to shiver. Ginger was chopped or grated, then wrapped in cloth and dunked into the water like a massive tea bag. Supposedly it improved circulation and banished chills, and the scent was so strong you'd walk home smelling like a dumpling for hours. Historians still debate how formal these seasonal infusions were. Some say it was rooted in folk medicine, passed down orally and implemented differently by neighbourhood. Others claim it was clever marketing, a way for bathhouse owners to keep things fresh, fragrant, and a step above the competition. Either way it worked. People remembered the scent. They talked about it. They chose their bathhouse based on it. The one near the theatre always uses citrus for New Year, someone might say. Or, avoid the one by the canal. Last year their chrysanthemum was half cabbage. Quirky detail. On certain festival days, bathhouses were decorated with sprigs of pine, seasonal flowers, or even small offerings to bath gods. At New Year, it wasn't uncommon to find a single mandarin orange floating in the tub, a symbol of purity, longevity, and a subtle hint that spring would come again. And don't forget mugwort, a bitter herb used in summer baths to combat sweat and insect bites. The bathhouse boys would wrap clumps of it in mesh cloth and let it bob beside your elbow. Not exactly luxurious, but hey, it beat slapping mosquitoes. Sometimes the infusion wasn't herbal at all, it was just symbolic. During the Obon festival in midsummer, when the spirits of the dead returned briefly to the world, some bathhouses would dim their lights, allowing only small lanterns to flicker at the edges of the room. You'd sit in the steam, half lit, half seen, imagining the ancestors soaking alongside you. You didn't speak much during Obon baths, just listened. To the fire, to the dripping water, maybe to something else. Even the bathhouse workers got in on the seasonal action. They'd change out the floor mats, oil the wooden beams with stronger scents, or hang small wind chimes near the changing area. Those chimes, not just decorative. The tinkling helped calm overheated patrons, signalling that the world beyond the steam still existed, and that you hadn't boiled away into some dreamlike netherworld. And there were bugs. Oh yes, summer brought them. Mosquitoes, moths, the occasional lost cicada buzzing somewhere near the ceiling, probably regretting its life choices. Bathhouses would hang bundled incense sticks to smoke the place mildly, keeping insects dazed just long enough for you to finish your rinse. And if that failed, well, you swatted between ladles and hoped for the best. You remember once, during high summer, entering a bathhouse so thick with cedar smoke and mugwort steam that it felt like walking into a witch's cauldron. You sat down, blinked, and for 10 solid minutes lost track of your own limbs. Seasonal baths weren't just a gimmick, they were a form of embodied timekeeping, a way to remind yourself as you soaked that the world was shifting, that you were part of something larger, that even in the belly of a boiling tub the seasons had not forgotten you, and some days that's all you needed. Tomorrow the Yuya might toss in peels from a neighbour's orange harvest, or shreds of dried kelp, or maybe, just maybe, he'll go full indulgence and float sakura petals in the water. You'll only see them for 5 minutes before they dissolve. But those 5 minutes, they'll stay with you for weeks. So tonight, as the wind carries in the scent of ginger and soot, you rest knowing this. Bathing in Edo wasn't just about scrubbing off dirt, it was about marking time, body, and soul. And tomorrow's bath will smell like something new. You're halfway through your evening meal, a bowl of rice, pickled plum, and a cup of thin miso, when your neighbour leans over the balcony with a mischievous grin. "Did you hear what happened at the bathhouse last week?" she whispers. Of course, you haven't. And of course, you want to. She glances down the alley, lowers her voice and begins, "Someone peeked." That's all she says. But it's enough. You both know what she means. Because the curtain didn't always hold. In theory, Edo's bathhouses were paragons of propriety, segregated by time slot, fortified with modesty panels, overseen by vigilant yuya and concerned grandmothers. But in practice, well, steam gets slippery. At some point in the city's long, sweaty history, gendered separation came under pressure, not just from population growth and architectural limitations, but from something simpler, older, and harder to legislate: curiosity. The most basic dividing line between men and women's bathing areas in most Edo bathhouses was a norin, a fabric curtain, often just hanging waist-high. That's it. Not a wall, not even a full screen. Just a rectangle of cloth, fluttering in the humidity, serving as the thinnest possible barrier between what was seen and what was supposed to be left unseen. Historians still debate how separate these gendered spaces really were. Some claim the curtains were symbolic at best, that in smaller bathhouses the same room was used by both genders with little more than scheduling and subtlety to keep things proper. Others insist there were partitions, hours strictly divided, and that any breach was rare and scandalous. And that's the word you keep hearing in this whisper net of neighbours: scandal. Quirky fact: in the early Edo period, mixed bathing was common, especially in rural towns and smaller cities. It wasn't even considered inappropriate at first, just practical. But as Confucian ethics tightened their grip and the city grew denser, concerns about modesty and public decency prompted changes. By the mid-1700s, government officials began issuing edicts strongly discouraging co-ed bathing. Yet still, the stories persisted. Stories of curtains accidentally drifting aside in a sudden draft, of bathhouse boys lingering too long near the women's rinse stations, of mismatched scheduling that just so happened to overlap for a few steamy, awkward minutes. And of course, the peeker. Every bathhouse had a tale. A boy caught sneaking a glance through a knothole, a man with bad timing and worse excuses, a curious girl ducking under the norin by accident while chasing her towel. The response was almost always the same: gasps, scolding, a swift escort out, and a lifetime of humiliation. You've seen it once. A young apprentice, maybe 13, clearly dared into mischief by his friends, peered for a moment too long through a crack in the changing screen. The bathhouse mother caught him mid-glance. The sound she made wasn't a yell, it was something quieter, and infinitely more terrifying. Every head turned. The room froze, and he was marched out, dripping, face redder than the bath water, never to be seen again. Some say he moved, others say he became a monk, maybe both. And yet, the tension never fully went away. Even with strict time slots, modesty curtains, and the ever-present threat of social annihilation, the bathhouse always simmered with a strange undercurrent. Not just of heat, but of awareness. You'd catch it in a glance held a moment too long, in the soft giggle behind the norin, in the way someone adjusted their towel when a new patron entered. Not overt, not rude, but undeniably human. After all, where else in Edo were men and women so near, so exposed, and so stripped of pretense? Nowhere. And maybe that's why the rules grew so strict. Why the curtains hung lower each decade. Why signs were posted, schedules refined, penalties enforced. Because behind all the ritual and rules and rhythmic bucket splashing was a truth no amount of cedar steam could hide. We're all aware of each other, even in silence, even through a curtain, even when we pretend not to be. There were also stories, softer ones, of bathhouse romance. Not scandalous, not lewd, just glances exchanged in the changing area, towel folds left artfully undone, a flower slipped into someone's rinse bucket noticed later, smiled at, never returned. No words needed, just steam and a bit of bravery. You think of that now as the wind picks up and stirs the evening lanterns. Somewhere nearby, someone is lighting the furnace for the final bath of the day. A couple walks past, each carrying a bucket, not speaking but keeping pace. Married, maybe. Or maybe just familiar enough to know silence can be a kind of closeness. You wonder if the curtain in their bathhouse flutters too, and you wonder, quietly without scandal, what stories might rise with the steam tonight. You're awakened before dawn the next morning by the soft, persistent clatter of someone hauling firewood. The sound echoes down the alleyway like a gentle drumbeat. Tap, tap, scrape. Tap. Another day. Another bath. And today your back aches a little more than usual. Not from lifting sacks of rice or dodging your neighbour's rooster, but from the bath itself. The heat always loosens your muscles at first, but then you feel it. That strange stiffness. That low pulse in your temples. And if you're being honest, your skin hasn't quite stopped tingling since yesterday, which means it's time to ask a question no one in Edo really wants to ask aloud. What if the bath is making you sick? You hesitate as you fold your towel, glancing out at the bathhouse down the street. The fire's already going. The air is thick with smoke and mist. But something inside you wonders, what happens when you're not feeling well and they still expect you to bathe? Because in Edo, being unwell wasn't a reason to skip the sento. It was a reason to bathe harder. You have a cough, take a longer soak, your joints hurt, sit closer to the furnace. Headache? Try the mugwort infusion. It'll make you sweat it out. This was the prevailing wisdom. Heat cleansed, sweat healed. The hotter the water, the stronger the medicine. You were never supposed to avoid the bath. You were supposed to lean into it. Historians still debate the actual health benefits of this belief. Some argue that the intense heat helped relieve minor aches and kill bacteria on the skin, acting as a crude kind of disinfection. Others say it was placebo at best, and in many cases actively dangerous, especially for the elderly or those with fever. But Edo people weren't thinking about blood pressure or dehydration, they were thinking about balance. The body was seen as a system of energies, hot and cold, wet and dry. When you were sick, it was assumed one of those energies had shifted out of alignment. A hot bath, it could push you back into place, or knock you further off the edge. Quirky footnote. There are records of people using the bath as a fever-breaking chamber. You'd soak until your body couldn't take it anymore, then douse yourself in cool water and shiver under your yukata, hoping the sickness would break like a fevered fever dream. If you were lucky, it worked. If not, well, at least you died clean. You sit down on your steps, rubbing your shoulders. They're tender. You think of the old woman who lives 2 doors down. She still bathes every morning, even in winter, even when her knees don't bend quite right. She claims it keeps her awake on the inside. You believe her. But also, you've seen her fall asleep twice on the rinse bench. The bathhouse is not for the weak. Or maybe it creates the weak one steamed joint at a time, and yet, skipping it feels unthinkable. Not just for social reasons, but because even when it hurts, the bath provides a kind of reset. Like a ritual your body understands more than your brain. So you go. You walk slowly, towel tucked under your arm, bucket sloshing just slightly with your herbal mix of the day, ginger and salt. Your friend swears by it, says it draws out the bad spirits in your joints. You don't argue. Your knees are starting to believe in spirits too. Inside the bathhouse, the steam hits you like memory. The floorboards creak in familiar ways. A man sneezes softly in the corner. Someone's kid is already getting dunked by a determined grandmother. It's all the same, but also slightly heavier. Because when you're not well, the bath becomes a test of endurance. The water feels hotter than usual. You hesitate, dip a foot. Your heart skips once, not from panic, but from the sudden surge of heat that pulses through your chest. You ease in, sit low, focus your breath, and then you start sweating. Not just a little, not like usual. This is deeper, the kind that makes your fingertips prune faster, that makes your vision go a bit misty around the edges. It's not painful, but it's close. And you wonder, is this healing? Or is it just punishment? You remember stories of people fainting in the bath, slipping underwater, collapsing on the walk home, heart racing, skin blazing. It happened, not often, but often enough for whispers to float like steam. He stayed in too long, didn't drink enough water, tried to cure a fever with a furnace. Still you stay, because part of you believes it too, that if you just sweat a little more, breathe a little deeper, let the heat scour every corner of whatever malaise is lurking inside you, you'll come out new. The bath will burn away your pain, not just physical pain either, grief, worry, that quiet sense of being off, like a shelf leaning just a few degrees too far. The bath takes it, or tries. You finally rise dizzy but stable. You splash yourself with cool water. It helps, sort of. You dry slowly, careful not to rush. Your towel sticks to your back, half saturated, and for a moment you swear the air smells faintly of camphor and relief. You return home lighter, not cured, but better. Maybe. You drink tea, sit near the window, watch your breath in the morning air. It's thin, faint, like steam rising from a body not quite finished deciding whether it feels worse or free. It's late afternoon now. The light outside is turning that soft amber shade that only ever means two things in Edo. Prepare dinner or prepare for fire. Because in this city, so beautiful, so carefully arranged, so oddly damp and yet forever dry in the wrong ways, everything burns. And bathhouses, they burn first. You walk past the narrow lane where the bathhouse stands, and for a moment you just stop and stare. You've been in there a dozen times this month alone, probably more. You know the creak of the boards. You've memorized the sound of the furnace crackling, the cadence of water splashing, the way your towel sticks to your chest on especially humid mornings. But what you haven't really paid attention to until now is the fact that the entire building is made of wood. Bone-dry, sun-aged, resin-rich wood. And the heat, it's not from some carefully sealed boiler. It's from an open fire fed by bundles of pine and cedar just beneath the bathing tub. You look up. The roof, wood. The walls, wood and paper. The doorframe, wood. The entire bathhouse is basically a kindling sculpture. And it's not alone. Edo was one of the most flammable cities in recorded history. Between the packed wooden houses, narrow alleys, paper screens, open charcoal braziers, and oil lamps everywhere, the whole place was basically one poof away from becoming a cautionary tale. In fact, fires were so common they were given a polite euphemism, the flowers of Edo. Romantic, right? Until you realize that dozens of these flowers bloomed every year, and they took entire blocks with them. Historians still argue about the precise cause of the largest Edo fires. Some blame lightning, others careless cooking. But bathhouses? Bathhouses were often the spark, because their furnaces burned hot, early and long. All it took was one apprentice forgetting to dampen the ashes, or a coal falling from the grate, and suddenly, flames licking the roof, smoke choking the sky, neighbours screaming, buckets flying. Quirky detail, Edo had firefighters, but not like you'd think. The famous Haikshi weren't about water hoses and ladders. They were about demolition. Their job wasn't to put the fire out, it was to stop it from spreading by tearing down the houses next to it. Fast. So when a bathhouse went up, the neighbours didn't douse it. They smashed the homes around it to create a fire break. You remember hearing about a fire in the Kanda district last year. Started in a bathhouse. Mid-morning soak, too many people, furnace flaring hot. Someone left a bundle of oiled towels too close to the vent. Within minutes, the roof was gone. Within an hour, 40 homes were ash. No deaths, thankfully, but the street hasn't quite recovered. And yet, people still went to the bathhouse the very next day. They found a temporary spot, or joined a neighbour's rotation, or walked to another district, because you still had to bathe. Fire or no fire, because not bathing, That was worse. That was suspicious. That was unclean. The bathhouse across from you now is one of the older ones. The beams are scorched in one corner from a fire 3 years ago. It didn't collapse, though. The Yuya rebuilt it, reinforced the ceiling, replaced the water trough, added new clay tiles to the roof, and then he just reopened, as if nothing had happened. Because in Edo, nothing happening was never an option. You step inside, and the smell hits you again. It's not smoke, not today, but charcoal, still warm, still smouldering just beneath the tub. The apprentice is tending the furnace, carefully poking the coals with a long metal rod, eyes sharp, motions smooth. He glances at you, nods. You nod back. No words exchanged, but both of you know this fire is friend and enemy. The very thing that warms your limbs each morning could also consume your entire street. It gives and it threatens. You watch him feed the flames. Not too much, just enough. It's an art. And here's a truth you've learned. The bathhouse doesn't survive because it's safe. It survives because it's essential. Risk is baked into its walls like smoke into your towel, but people keep coming because the bath is where you start your day, where you hear the news, where you show your face, where you sweat out your aches, whisper secrets, scold your child, flirt with someone maybe you shouldn't, where your community exists, not in theory, but in flesh and steam. And so, each morning, someone lights a fire under a wooden tub inside a wooden house, beside other wooden houses. And every morning, the neighbourhood prays just a little, that today is steam, not smoke. You're staggering down the path now, towel clinging to your neck, hair still damp, skin faintly tingling in that way only a 48 D's bath can produce. The scent of cedar and steam still wraps around you like a second robe, but you're not floating home with serene enlightenment. No. You're dizzy, light-headed, and teetering somewhere between mild euphoria and absolute collapse. Welcome to the bathhouse aftermath, a uniquely Edo sensation that's half spiritual cleansing, half physiological ambush. Every step feels like you're walking on tightly packed sand. Your muscles are soft but not weak. Your joints are loose but not lazy. And your vision? Slightly fuzzed around the edges. The world looks like it's been run through a damp rice paper filter. It's not just you. This is what happens to everyone who stays a little too long, soaks a little too deep, or forgets to cool down before heading back into the brutal humidity of Edo's streets. It's called uatari, a term that roughly translates to bath-stunned, and it's as common in Edo as miso soup and unsolicited neighbourly judgment. You've seen it before. The wobbly knees, the 1,000-yard stare, the staggered exhale. That moment when someone steps from the warm cocoon of the bathhouse into the shock of open air and realises that, oops, their internal organs might be temporarily soup. Uatari isn't dangerous, not usually. But it's the bath's quiet revenge for disrespecting the sacred cool-down. The moment you try to bolt straight from the tub to the street, without resting, without rehydrating, without chilling out, the bath reminds you who's in charge. Historians still argue over how much of uatari is physical versus psychological. Some claim it's just heat stroke in elegant disguise. Others suggest it's a culturally conditioned response. Part ritual, part somatic release. The body letting go of tension all at once, leaving the nervous system flopping around like a fish in shallow water. Quirky footnote. Some Edo bathhouses built dedicated cool-down benches, strategically placed near open windows to catch the breeze. They weren't just for drying off, they were safety zones. One bathhouse even handed out cups of cold barley tea to those who looked particularly woozy. A small act of mercy wrapped in politeness. You didn't sit long enough today. You admit it. You were feeling confident, feeling clean, feeling like you could skip the cool-down bench just this once. And now, you're half drifting, trying to remember if your feet are still attached. But even in this daze, there's something beautiful about it. Your skin glows. Literally. The thin sheen of moisture reflects the late sun. Your hair, tied back sloppily, still carries the scent of iris and smoke. Every breeze feels exaggerated, like the wind has become its own language. The city hasn't changed, still noisy, still crowded, still full of carts rattling over cobblestones and someone yelling about fermented radish. But you have changed. The bath has made you new, tender, fragile, yes, but realigned. You walk past a group of elderly women gossiping near a tea stall. One of them nods at you and says, "Too long in the water?" You nod back with the sheepish smile of someone who knows they've overcooked themselves like a daikon slice. They chuckle. One offers you a slice of pickled plum. You accept it with the gratitude of a man given a lifeline. The salt shocks your tongue, grounds you. A trick they all know. A bath without salt afterward is like a play without an audience. Incomplete. You finally make it to your home, ducking under the low eaves. The tatami mat under your feet feels cooler than usual. The walls seem quieter. You sit down, towel draped over your shoulders, bucket placed beside you like a loyal companion, and then you breathe. Not a sigh, not a gasp, just a full, complete inhale. One of those rare, uninterrupted breaths that seems to go all the way down to your spine. You're no longer dizzy, just empty. The good kind. The kind of empty that feels like a clean slate, like you've scraped away the day's irritations, the city's grime, the weight of needing to look like you know what you're doing. You don't, not really, but you bathed, and that counts for something. Outside you hear a splash. Probably your neighbour's kid tossing out the rinse water. Someone laughs, a dog barks, the city swirls on, unaware of your mild post-bath enlightenment. But you'll carry this feeling for a while, maybe into dinner, maybe into sleep. Tomorrow it'll be gone, replaced by the ache in your calves, the weight of obligations, the dust, the sweat, the smells. But tomorrow too there will be another bath, and another chance to rinse the world off your skin. Evening settles over Edo like a thick silk robe. The lanterns blink to life, one by one, casting soft orange halos that shimmer against the sliding paper screens. You sit by the open window, letting the cool breeze dry the last dampness in your collar, the city murmuring like a lullaby around you. And tomorrow, it all begins again. Because the bath, it never rests. Already, the Yuya is banking the fires. His apprentice is scrubbing the floor with a soaked rag that has cleaned more corners than it cares to remember. Buckets are being drained, rinsed, refilled. The wooden tub, still warm, exhales one final curl of steam into the night like a tired dragon sighing. And in just a few hours before the birds sing, the cycle starts anew. You might not go again tomorrow. Your knees still ache. Your shoulders are sunburned. Your towel smells a bit like roasted radish. But you will go. Because you must. Because in Edo, bathing isn't about desire, it's about duty, about appearing in public as part of the living clockwork of your neighbourhood. You bathe to belong. To be clean, yes, but also to be seen as clean. Presentable, accounted for. Even if no one says it, the bath is a checkpoint, a ritual that confirms you're still functioning, still making the effort, still moving forward, even if your progress is measured in tiny steps between the rinse stool and the boiling tub. You think of the others, the quiet man who never speaks but always nods once before he leaves, the older woman who wears her towel like a crown, the boy who shrieks at every splash but keeps coming back, even the Yuya who never smiles but always warms the water just a little more than he needs to. You're all wrapped in the same rhythm. Strangers in clothing, but familiars in steam. Quirky detail, one final thought. Some bathhouses place small wooden plaques on the wall with the names of their most loyal patrons. Not for status, just acknowledgement. A way of saying, this person shows up, day after day. No plaque bears your name. Yet. But maybe one day it will. If not on a board, then in a glance. A nod. A towel folded in just the way that says, yes, this person understands how hot is too hot. Historians may argue endlessly over Edo's health practices. Was it cleaner than Europe? Was the bath hygienic or merely habitual? Did it prevent disease or just make people feel in control? But for those who lived it, you, here, now, none of that really matters. The bath was a fact of life. You enter the tub and you enter society. Naked, but not alone. Clean, but never finished. And when you step back out, dizzy and dripping, you carry something invisible with you. A kind of badge. A vaporous shield. Proof that you faced the fire and came out glowing. Tomorrow morning the water will scald again. You'll hesitate again. You'll feel every rule pressed down on you again. And still, you'll go. Because in Edo the bathhouse isn't a place. It's a practice. A rhythm you can't escape. A ritual you wouldn't dare abandon. And somehow, against all logic, you'll crave it again. Even if you wouldn't survive it. Now close your eyes. Let the wooden walls fade. Let the buckets dry. And the towels fold themselves neatly on the edge of your thoughts. The heat is behind you now. The steam has lifted, and all that remains is the softness left in your limbs, like your body has remembered how to loosen, how to breathe without armour. The sounds of EO have quieted. No more sandals on stone, no more distant shouts, only the rhythmic creak of a floorboard in memory, and the hush of night slipping through a paper screen. Your skin still tingles, but gently now, like you've been rewound. The city sleeps, and beneath its dreams, fires still warm tomorrow's water. Let them burn slowly. Let them wait. You've done enough for today, so breathe. Deeper now. Let your breath rise and fall like steam lifting from the bath. Let each exhale carry away a little more of the weight you didn't know you were holding. You're not in Edo anymore, but you remember it. And somewhere, on a quiet street in the early hours of a world long gone, a bucket waits. Just for you, good night. 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 For you,